Yes, from the last election on, I'm talking about 2022, the situation of the human rights in Brazil have completely changed. We don't have anymore that kind of government against a government against human rights as we had during the last 4 years. The last government implemented, as you know, regulation on weapons, allowing an abusive increase of weapons in the possession of the population. And, well, he managed to reduce the protection against torture. Bolsonaro legislated against the national mechanism for the protection of torture that was as you know, that has an origin in international law. Bolsonaro released illegal mining, illegal deforestation, invasion of indigenous lands, drastic reduction in the protection of indigenous peoples, indigenous quilombolas and riverside peoples, all poor people. The new government under Lula could stop this setback and others. Okay, so, but as you know, and we have to understand that if Brazil may not be considered a poor country, it is an unfair and unequal country that has a large contingent of poor people. We are talking about almost 40 million living in extreme poverty. This reality of poverty experienced by the most dependent people, and we are in the 21st century, is alarming. So, poverty and inequality has limited the enjoyment of human rights and their effective access to justice. So we have a very different situation from the last 4 years, but we have to deal with poverty and inequality, limit the access to human rights. Yes, this year, the new government began with the most important threat against democracy. We call it January the 8th. When Bolsonaro went to Miami, you know that he refused to meet Lula during the ceremony of transmission. He went the night before, he went to Miami, and now we know that he began to organize the resistance to the elected government. So, as I said, he didn't hand over the government to the president, and he began to organize the campaign. You know that during the end of the last year, almost all military centers began to have civilian encampments asking for military intervention. These have shown the organized face of resistance to democracy. And finally, we have this 8th of January. You know, several buses arrived to Brasilia, coming from all over the states of Brazil, bringing patriots, and then they entered we call that part of Brasilia the Esplanada dos Ministérios, hundreds of people escorted by military vehicles and uniformed soldiers from the military police. They went straight to the parliament, part of them to the Supreme Court building, and even to the seat of the federal government, the presidential palace, our White House. And they invaded all the buildings. They destroyed part of the furniture, the glass windows, works of art, and made inscriptions with spray paint. All with the benevolence of soldiers present. You know, the former Minister of Justice was the new Secretary of Public Security for the Federal District, whom, even knowing that something big was going to happen in Brasilia, traveled to Miami with Bolsonaro. So Bolsonaro and the former Minister of Justice organized this act against democracy, but we have a reaction. The new Minister of Justice and the President, they decided for federal intervention in Brasilia, appointing the second man of the Ministry of Justice as interventor. And at the end of an extremely tense afternoon, evening, the coup d'etat was overcome with hundreds of people arrested, soldiers removed. So you asked me the threats against the rule of law. Well, I'm talking of hundreds of people arrested. Now, the people arrested were those caught at the site of the invasions or others caught on camera. But the polarization among Brazilians, the difference in votes between the two candidates was minimal. So hate speech continued as a form of dialogue. Hate speech as a dialogue between people. We are still living the campaign. So, and the inquiry against the invaders is being conducted by the president of the electoral tribunal. So, although hundreds of the detainees have been released, many prisoners have already been in prison and they are formally denounced. This is a problem. A democracy, we have a democracy, but this kind of prisoners are political prisoners. They are defended by public lawyers. Their human rights are being respected. They are being accused of common criminal offenses against democracy. So the people attacked the democratic regime of law and wanted the establishment of an illegal authoritarian regime similar to the military dictatorship. I think they are common criminals. But, you know, today, talking about, the threats against democracy, well, we overcome this one, but we have poverty, inequality, and I think we still have corruption. So I think these are some very serious problems against the rule of law in Brazil. Institutions are working. The press is free. Most of the written press attacks the new government. There are local governments that don't have the same orientation, political orientation, as the central government. So democracy is working. São Paulo, for instance, the most important state, at least economically speaking, at this moment is governed by the opposition party to Lula. The governor nowadays is a former minister of Bolsonaro, you know. But this kind of division could be a threat to the rule of law. The Congress, the new power of Congress is proving to be a problem to the new government and perhaps in the future to the rule of law. We know that the rule of law is fundamental to international peace and security and political stability. But, we know that we have to reach the goal 16. I'm talking about the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 agenda of the United Nations. But we have to think that there I can say that there are two Brazils. One is the Brazil that it's internationally known, but we have let's see, another Brazil, the deep Brazil. So the commission arms, I belong to the commission arms that was formed honoring the former Cardinal of Sao Paulo, Paulo Evaristo Arns. We decided to go to the deep Brazil. And we went straight to Pará in response to appeals from defenders of vulnerable communities in the interior of Pará. We decided to go to constitute a delegation to visit the territories in the state marked by violence in the countryside, Pará. Pará is known for emblematic crimes such as the massacre of Eldorado de Carajás, I don't know if you have heard about it, and the murder of the North American missionary Dorothy Stang in 2005. And what we have found: militia parallel operating power, violence against people, judges threatened, under threat, lawyers and judge under threat, corruption. If these things are not against the rule of law, I don't know what is the rule of law. The deep Brazil lives a most challenging situation talking about rule of law,